So I'll try to keep this short. I think my in-laws have lost their minds. About 6 months ago, my husband and I found out that I was pregnant, and after the announcement, there was a really marked change in his parents' attitude towards me. For context, I've been with my husband for 5 years, and we have been married for 3 years, and they have never liked me much. Definitely not as much as they like their other daughter-in-law. And I know exactly why they don't like me as much as I like her. It's because she's way easier to deal with than I am. No offense to her. After she got married, she changed cities according to what my in-laws wanted, so their son could be closer to them. I did not do so, and I chose to stay where I was born and raised. And I had made that very clear even before our marriage. So that became a bone of contention, and they tried to fight me on it. But I was very firm about my decision. My husband also stood by me because he knew that I had my reasons, and apart from that, he did not want to go back to staying in his hometown either, unless it was absolutely necessary. And besides, my in-laws just live a 10-hour drive away, or maybe a half-hour flight away, so it's not that far either. And we try to visit them every month, or at least every 2 months. But they have still always been very cold and distant from me, ever since the wedding, and I thought that it was finally changing because they really started warming up to me after we announced my pregnancy. I thought that they were finally accepting me to the family because they started keeping in touch with me and started showering me with gifts. But now I legit think that they're insane because they are asking for all the gifts back, and they're even asking me to reimburse them for the trip that they had funded when I was 2 months pregnant for me to go and visit Greece with my husband, because we had been planning on doing that before we got pregnant. Over the last 6 months, they have sent me a lot of gifts, most of them being baby stuff like clothes, bassinets, toys, and all that. They've also sent me some gifts for myself, like some stunning pearl earrings and a diamond bracelet, lots of pretty expensive makeup, things like that. I was pretty happy about it because I really don't think that they would ask for it back at any point. They also seemed thrilled because this was the first grandchild in the family, and they wanted to show me how thankful they were for making them grandparents. I didn't suspect anything off, which I really should have, because in hindsight, they seemed more focused on the fact that I was giving them their first grandchild and the fact that I was their daughter-in-law and I shouldn't have to be a baby-making machine for them to like and respect me. Anyway, I was just so happy that they were finally warming up to me that I didn't think about all these nuances of the situation. So that was my bad, and I should have seen this coming. A couple of weeks ago, my sister-in-law and their other daughter-in-law announced that she was pregnant as well. And it's a huge deal because she has been struggling with fertility issues for the past 2 years. She and my brother-in-law have been trying IVF for the past couple of months, and it seems that it finally worked out for them. I was really happy for them. My husband and I congratulated them, and even though I knew that now my in-laws were probably going to focus more on her rather than me, I was still not upset or anything. But I definitely am upset now because they called me up a couple of days ago demanding all the gifts back, and even told me that I should reimburse them for the trip to Greece. And also the makeup that they had sent, because I've probably used it. They said that if they had known that their other daughter-in-law was going to get pregnant, they wouldn't have wasted all that money in the first place. And now, as awkward as it is to ask me for all of it back, they have to do it because they cannot afford to spend that amount of money once again so soon. And they definitely don't want her to feel left out. So it's important for them to give her gifts as well. On the phone call, they literally said that now her child was going to be the first grandchild of the family, even though chronologically, my child was about to be born first. And I don't know what it was. Instead of just agreeing to return everything to them and cutting them out of my life, I decided to pick a fight with them. And I told them that I was not returning anything because they were all gifts. And it was very humiliating that they were asking for it back in the first place. And they started coming up with a bunch of BS about how even though my child was going to be born first, my brother-in-law was their eldest son, and according to their relationship with him, his wife was the elder daughter-in-law of the family. And so naturally, their child, regardless of when he was born, was going to be the first grandchild. Don't ask me what any of it means. I don't think I'll be able to explain it. It's their own logic that they have applied here, and I personally don't accept it. So I told them the same, and before they could carry on the argument, I made it very clear that I was not returning anything, and then I hung up and blocked them. Since then, they've been bothering my husband about it nonstop, and he wants me to return everything so we can just get this over with and cut them out of our lives, because it's very clear that they have no respect for us. But for me right now, it's become a matter of principle, and I'm not returning any gifts or reimbursing them for anything. And my husband thinks that this is making the situation even more difficult to deal with. So AITA for refusing to return and reimburse my in-laws for all the gifts that they had showered me with post my pregnancy announcement. Edit. Okay, so I didn't mention this in my post because I did not think that it was relevant, but the reason I did not want to change cities was because my parents live here. My work is here and all my friends are here. But most importantly, my dad suffers from Parkinson's and I like being around him. I'm their only child. They don't have any other kids. And I know that would be fine without me because he has my mom and he has a nurse. But even then, I like being around them because it makes me feel safe. And I know that they appreciate it as well. It's not like something that they have demanded, so I have to stick by them. They had even told me that if I wanted to, I could definitely move to my in-laws' city so that they wouldn't have a problem with me. But that was not what I wanted. And on top of that, even my husband has told me that he doesn't want to go back. He left home for college. He came to my city for work, and then he met me through friends, and since then, we've been together. He has told me that he likes living away from home, and it's not like his parents are completely on their own. The rest of his family and his brother all live near them. And that's one of the biggest reasons that he moved away, because he knew that if he went back, then he would be expected to visit his family every weekend, as his brother does, and he doesn't want that. He finds his family to be very overbearing, and he thinks that they don't give him his freedom, which I agree with, because they were very controlling for most of his childhood. But that's another story altogether. Anyway, my point is that even though their own son has told them that it is his decision as well, that he doesn't want to move back, my in-laws only blame me for this. I don't understand how I'm the main culprit when my husband also doesn't want to move back home and has agreed to stay with me here quite happily. The bottom line is that they are just upset that I'm not as easy to control as their other daughter-in-law, so that's why I'm the bad guy according to them. Update 1. Okay, so it's been 5 days since I last spoke to my in-laws. And since then, they have stayed blocked. For a couple of days, they went back and forth with my husband, but for the past few days, even he has been avoiding them and has stopped responding to their messages. But that doesn't mean that everything between us is fine and all good again. He was quite upset with me because we had different opinions on how to deal with the situation. Like I said, he wanted to return everything and reimburse them for all the money that they had spent on us so we could, without thinking much about it, cut them off permanently. because this was getting a little too much for us to handle. And clearly, they were being very disrespectful, so he wanted nothing to do with them. And he said that he would be very uncomfortable keeping all those gifts that we had received, knowing that they wanted it back. It was just going to make him feel weird. So he wanted me to return all of it. But like I said, it had become a matter of principle for me. So I was not about to return anything at all. We had been arguing about it for a couple of days, and even though he was still talking to me, he was being very cold and I couldn't take it. So yesterday I sat him down and I decided to talk it through with him once and for all. I was very skeptical as to whether he would be open to discussing this with me or not. Because the last time that we had spoken about this, we got into a fight and he told me he didn't want to talk about this anymore. And I was free to do whatever I wanted because at the end of the day, the gift had been more for me and the baby rather than for him. So ultimately, it was my decision and he didn't want to discuss this anymore because clearly we had very different opinions and we could never be able to come to an agreement with this. And he did not want to fight with me while I was pregnant because he felt bad upsetting me. I mean, you guys can obviously figure out he's a really sweet person. And I was very unhappy that he was unhappy, so I decided to sort things out with him for that reason. And also because I could definitely see his point. I just wanted him to see mine as well, which I wasn't sure he was able to. So anyway, we sat down together and I explained my side of things to him. I told him that for me, it was not just about the gifts and the money, that we could return them and I wouldn't even care, to be honest, because it's not like we are too poor to afford things of our own. But it's more than just the gifts. It's this expectation they have that they can be as hot and cold as they want with us, and we're just going to take it, especially me, because they've never been nice to me, and all of us are. They started acting as if I was the most important person in their life just because I was going to give birth to their grandchild. I told him that I hadn't realized that earlier because I was too busy being happy about the fact that I was finally being accepted into the family. And I was so busy celebrating that I didn't see what actually was happening. The fact of the matter was that they were not celebrating me at all. They were celebrating the fact that they were going to have a grandchild, and by extension, since the child was not born yet, they had to do with me. My acceptance of the family had nothing to do with who I am as a person, but everything to do with the fact that I was carrying a baby that was important to them. So my existence alone had no value to them. And that in itself was quite insulting. That was the first reason. And secondly, it became even worse when they expected me to give up everything that I had received from them just so that they could hand it over to my brother's wife because all of a sudden her baby was more valuable than mine. And I really do feel happy for her that she was able to get pregnant after so many unsuccessful attempts and struggles with her fertility. But that doesn't mean that my pregnancy is any less important than her. For my in-laws to even imply that is just disgusting. And I even told him about all the logic that they had applied, whatever I had mentioned in my first and original post about how, according to the relationship that she had with their eldest son, her child was going to be the first grandchild or whatever. Even that was quite insulting because if I'm not wrong, chronologically, my child is going to be born first. So that is obviously going to make him the first grandchild, whether they like it or not. They can't just take that away from us because it's convenient for them. And most importantly, they cannot just do whatever they want and expect everybody to be fine with it. And they need to be taught a lesson. So with that in mind, I refuse to give anything back to them. And if they can't deal with it, that's their problem. After all, these are supposed to be gifts, and you don't ask for gifts back. And even if you do, it's not compulsory for the person to give it back to you. And people might call me petty for it, but I'm sick of them. And they don't get to push people around just because they feel like it. And even though, while I was typing it, I got a bit carried away. It might have come off as aggressive while I was actually speaking to him and explaining these things to him. I was very calm because I know that he doesn't like screaming. And the last time that I tried to explain to him, I kind of got out of control with my emotions. So this time, I chose to be as calm as possible, and he actually responded well to it. He told me that he understood where I was coming from, and he apologized to me for being so cold. He also told me that part of this is his fault as well, because even though my parents had always been respectful of him and our relationship, his parents had never been the same way. They had always been very distant and never even made an attempt to be nice to me. And in spite of that, he had always kept in touch with them and had, by extension, put me in a situation where I also had to be nice to them and meet them, even though everyone knew that they did not like me much. So he wanted to apologize to me for that, and also for not understanding my point earlier and getting upset with me. And he told me that I was free to do whatever I wanted because at the end of the day, they were gifts that had been directed to me and not him. And if I did not want to return them, then that was fine with him because anyway, he had chosen to start ignoring his parents. And he didn't want anything to do with them anymore. The gifts were none of his business because it's not like they had asked him before sending it to me. I could deal with it the way that I wanted to. He told me that if it had been up to him, he would have returned everything and cut them off. But since it's not up to him, he doesn't want to get involved anymore. And I know it sounds a little passive aggressive, but trust me, the conversation we had was anything but that. We were very upfront with each other, and in the end, we just agreed to disagree. We dealt with it like two adults, and we have to have our own opinions. Just because we are married doesn't mean that we need to agree on every little thing. And this is between me and his parents, so he has given me free rein to deal with the situation how I want to, and is being respectful of my feelings and opinions. That's what I want right from the beginning, so this works out well for me. Long story short, at least I was able to sort things out with my husband, and now we are back on good terms again. His behavior has gone back to normal. And I also really appreciate the fact that he apologized to me for pretending that everything was normal between his parents and the two of us for the past couple of years, ever since we got married, even though they had made it very clear that they did not like me. Honestly, it had never occurred to me something he needed to apologize to me for. It never even seemed like a big deal. But I am glad that he decided to tell me that he was sorry about it. It's just fascinating how his parents are the complete opposite of him. I don't even understand how they managed to raise such a sweet and understanding person because the way that they are. Anyway, he did show me the messages that they had sent in the last few days. And even though he had not been responding, they had kept up their attempts to keep trying to bother him. They had said the nastiest things about me. They had called me a thief. They had said that I was a gold digger. They had told him that marrying me was the biggest mistake of his life and that he was going to regret it forever. My husband had not replied to any of this, and he had just muted his parents. But after that message that they sent to him about me being the biggest mistake and all that, he blocked them today. He told me that he had had enough. He had not blocked them earlier because he thought that at some point they might apologize, but they didn't. And the things they were saying about me, it was just unacceptable because they had no idea what they were even talking about. They had never even given me a chance. They had just decided I was not a good influence on him, and since then, they had started acting weird with me and had never bothered to get to know me on a more personal basis. Even before we got married, we met each other very rarely, only during family events. So they did not know me well back then. And after the engagement, when they found out I was not going to be changing cities for them, they made it up in their own heads that I was not a good person. And that's what they have believed ever since. So they really have no idea what kind of a person I actually am. And so they have no right to say such horrible things about me. He told me that now, come what may, he's never going to be speaking to his parents again, and they are not going to have any contact with our child because I'm not just a baby making machine. I'm my own person, and if they can't respect me, then they don't need to be around my baby either. I think it's really sweet, and I'm glad I have a husband who stands up for me, even if it's against his own family. Update 2. Hey, so it's been a week since my last update, and today I received a phone call from someone very unexpected. My brother-in-law's wife. The last time I had spoken to her had been a couple of weeks ago when my husband and I had congratulated her on their pregnancy. Since then, we hadn't spoken, and as far as I knew, even my husband had not spoken to his brother. I'm sure that my brother-in-law and his wife were aware of what was going on with my in-laws, since they're all pretty close. But she had always been very nice to me, so I picked up when she called and we made some small talk before she got to the point. I had received an invitation to her pregnancy party that she was hosting. It was supposed to be happening in a couple of days, and she had called me to ask if I would be attending or not, because my husband and I are the only people who haven't RSVP'd yet. Truth be told, when we had received the invitation, we had still been thinking about it, and ultimately we had decided against it because firstly, we really did not want to see his parents at the moment. And obviously we were aware of the fact that they were going to be there. But more importantly, at this stage of my pregnancy, I did not feel comfortable flying or driving for 10 hours. I just wanted to stay home because as it is, I'm tired all the time. And I just don't have the energy. We had made the decision, but in all honesty, we've both been quite busy, so we forgot to respond to the invitation. So when she called, I told her that we would not be able to attend, but I only mentioned the second reason regarding my pregnancy. I did not bring up the situation with my in-laws because she hadn't done that, even though I was pretty sure that she knew. Anyway, when I told her that I would not be attending, she told me that she had already guessed it, but even then she had called just to make sure. And then she told me that she was expecting me to have some other reason for not attending, and that was the hint that she knew about the situation with my in-laws. But even then, I was in no mood to discuss it with her because even though she's been nice, we're not exactly that close. So I just laughed it off and I tried to dismiss it as nothing, but she did not let it go. And she told me that if I wanted to, I could talk to her about it. But like I said, I really did not want to talk about it. And she hadn't explicitly mentioned it either. So I just didn't say anything, and I didn't want to be rude. So I told her that I just did not want to discuss anything because I was tired. And since I did not say anything, she herself started speaking. I have to say, I was pretty shocked at the things she said because she had always been quite docile. And I thought that she actually got along well with our in-laws. But as it turned out, she was just as upset with them as I was, if not more. I think more because she had actually put up with them for far longer than I had had to. She complained about them for about an hour and had so much to say that I actually forgot about my problems and started empathizing with her instead. Apparently, she had not wanted to change cities either, but her in-laws said that if they did not do so, then they would not pay for the wedding, and it was pretty last minute. All the arrangements had already been made, so she had to agree. Her parents pushed her into it as well because they did not want the marriage to be called off, so that ended up happening. Then, even though she did not want to see them every weekend, they were pretty manipulative and guilt-tripped her husband into coming over every weekend to see them, and she had to put up with them with a smile on her face all the time, even though she couldn't stand them. And then they started pressuring her to get pregnant, even though she was not ready for it. But out of frustration, they started trying, and then the struggle with fertility issues started. She was perfectly happy not getting pregnant because she did not want to have a child. But after a year or so, they started bugging her even more and wanted her to try IVF. At one point, I thought maybe she was still not ready for a child even now, while she was pregnant, which would have been quite alarming, but thankfully she said that in the past couple of months, she herself had actually also started wanting a baby because she was the correct age. And I guess the shift in her mindset, her willingness, as impossible as it might sound to other people, was what led to her finally getting pregnant. The universe really did align for her because she did not get pregnant when her in-laws wanted her to, but she did get pregnant when she herself wanted it. And then after the whole fight with me, our in-laws started telling her and her husband about it. And because she chose to finally stand up against them and speak up on my behalf, they got mad. Her husband tried to play the mediator between her and our in-laws for a couple of days, but after a while, even he got up on it. Because right now, his priority is not pleasing his parents anymore. And she couldn't be more thankful for it, from what I judged. So TLDR, even my brother-in-law and his wife have cut my in-laws out of their life because I think the way they were getting so difficult to deal with, so controlling and overbearing, it got on their nerves as well, and they just couldn't deal with it anymore. I'm glad that I decided to speak to her because I got to find out a lot of things. And I think this whole fight with our in-laws has brought us closer together because it had always felt like my husband and I were on one side and his brother and his wife, no matter how nice they were to us, had been on the other. But now I guess we're all on the same side. And on the other side, it's just their parents. So that's nice. And a couple of hours earlier, after my husband came back from work, I told him all about my phone call with his sister-in-law, and all four of us got on a call and really trashed my in-laws. It was actually pretty fun, and I'm very happy that everyone can see their true colors now. Update 3. Hi, I'm sorry for not posting any updates. There was just nothing much to say. My in-laws and I still have not spoken. I didn't give any gifts to them because they clearly did not need them. It's not like they're not on speaking terms with their other daughter-in-law anymore. And after my husband blocked them, they didn't try to get in touch with us either. But they did badmouth us to everyone else in the family. Doesn't matter though. It just means that we have fewer folks to keep up appearances with whenever we visit my brother-in-law and his wife. Speaking of them, we have become a lot tighter than we were before, and I'm very grateful for it. I have a lot of pregnancy tips for my sister-in-law, and we've become quite close over the past few weeks. And with my due date coming up, she told me that she's going to visit along with her husband after the baby's born. And once I'm ready to have visitors, because we have a lot to catch up on, and I'm very excited. I'm glad that things worked out well, and my husband and I really cannot wait to be parents soon. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.